You're tuning into the Journey to Your Best Self podcast, where we explore the past holistic well-being, personal growth, and living a fulfilling life. Each episode, we bring you insightful conversations, practical tools, and inspiring stories to help you integrate your mind, body, and spirit on your journey to becoming your best self. Let's dive in and embark on this journey together. Welcome back to the Journey to Your Best Self podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian O'Neill, joined by my sister, clinical hypnotherapist, yoga instructor, and certified life coach, Tara O'Neill. We're here to guide you on the path of integrating mind, body, and spirit, helping you connect more deeply with your true self. Today, we're so excited to be joined by author Mark Collins. He's written the very impactful book, Life Mastery, Living by Design. And he's also a business and life coach, an expert in empowering people to overcome fear and live intentionally. Today, we're going to discuss life mastery with him. There's going to be a ton of stuff I think our audience, viewers, and listeners are really going to get out of here. We're going to explore how his unique approach aligns with our mission at Your One Self of self-realization through mind, body, and spirit integration. So we're real blessed, and I think everyone that's tuning in is going to take a lot out of this hour. So Mark, welcome aboard.
Thanks so much for having me, Brian and Tara. I'm excited for the conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. We're really excited.
Absolutely. So let's go back to the genesis, pun intended, Pastor Mark. But where did it all start, you wanting to help people find their calling or find their true purpose? Was there something that personally happened to you? Did you have that kind of that moment of Saul? Was there something that had happened in your life where you discovered your calling and then you said, oh, I have to share this or I have to spread the word? Was there a moment? Was there someone that influenced you? Was there a book you read? And then we'll go from there.
Appreciate the question, Brian. It's a really good one. And so I tell people for my course, Life Mastery, in the book, Life Mastery, Living Life by Design, it wasn't a clever idea or a good instruction that I felt like I wanted to create and invest in and give to other people. It was really, the genesis of it was needing it in my own life. And so for me, it was this young man growing up believing that there was more for him than the life he was living. It wasn't really a book, honestly. It was an unknown understanding that there was this person on the inside who, was confident and assured and could succeed in life, whether it's in relationship or business or school or what have you. But I wasn't seeing that man lived out on the outside. We could unpack some of that in childhood and belief systems and all of that. But the core of it was this belief that there's more than the life I'm living, not wealth and, acclaim and all of that, but this confidence and assurance of actually living out that life of being fully assured in who I am, right? What I call it in our course and the things we teach is identity, understanding who you're created to be. So the genesis for me was me and trying to figure it out for myself, reaching out and trying a bunch of different things and trying to really see that person lived out, programs, personal development, what have you. And for me, they brought great change, but really it was just changing one habit for another, changing doubt for some habit that I had to continue to live out whatever that thing was that was my goal. It's a much longer story, but really, I am a Christian. And so finding in the Bible and in the things that I was doing there and pairing it with personal development to see this instruction that showed me how to really unleash the person I was created to be. Fast forwarding through figuring it out in my own journey and what I call the transformational journey of going from believing who you are from your past to living out who you're created to be and creating what I call a blueprint to go from hurt to healed or from bound to free. And in that place, wanting to share it like with you guys. I'm sure Brian and Terry, when you find something that you think is amazing, whatever that thing is, you want to share it with people you care about. And so for me, it started there. And then I started to see in other people the things I used to struggle with, fear and imposter syndrome. I mean, even, like I'm sure in the things that you guys do to help other people, the successful people that I had that I thought, you're successful in business or in relationship, you're somebody people look up to. So certainly you wouldn't struggle with those things, but then you get into relationship and you find out that there's a commonality across, at least for me, all the people I work with, that there's an informed identity from your past that while you can be successful, those things don't go away. They just come along for the ride. And so the course happened, I created that, and the book actually came afterwards as I was trying to give kind of more of a shortcut version to some of the tools and truth and strategies to live it out. And that brings us to our conversation today.
Why is it so important for people to take charge of their lives rather than just living in default mode and maybe coasting through when they may be high achievers, or they
Yeah.
may, by all accounts and everyone looking from the outside, have things going. Why is it so important for them to do that? What do they gain out of that? What do those around them gain out of that?
That's a great question. And for me, I think it's twofold. And the one thing is the everybody answer, and it is the thing that I believe, and that is that everybody has an impact that they're supposed to make in the world. And I think we all inherently know it. That's that kind of longing, that angst, that part on the inside that says, gosh, I feel like I'm here for a purpose. Whether you're a person of faith like me or not, I believe that for many of us, there's this draw towards living a life of impact. So that's the general, and that's what I find in a lot of people. But what I find interesting in the people that I work with that are successful in whatever they're doing is, first and foremost, it's the opposite side of it, which is this: success in one area does not guarantee you're not a disaster in another. And what I find the people I work with is, as I tell them, you're either living from your identity or you're living for the world to make up the difference. And in that place, success has to make up the difference. The problem is that when I use one thing to create my identity, I let everything else fall to the side. So for me, it's saying that people are successful in business that I work with, but their relationship is kind of a sidebar. It's on the side. They're kind of, they're roommates more than lovers and spouses, right? And it's in those places, or, the social and relational and the emotional things that come along with it, right? Those people who have unfortunately taken their life while at the pinnacle of what we consider success. But for me, what I find is that the people I work with, it's not that you're not successful, it's that you have self-limiting beliefs. So for what I believe is what we call life mastery, living out the life mastery journey is me living out at the maximum level I was created for in every area of life. Why is that important? Because anything less than that really robs you of the joy, the purpose, the passion, and the fulfillment that you would actually have. Success is great, right? And it has a momentary high that it can give you. Fulfillment is life and lifelong lasting. And so for me, the people I work with is letting them know, first off, what you and I both know as we're walking into in this conversation, whether whoever that business person is, that person who's got a job or trying to succeed at some level, is you're limiting yourself by the beliefs you're taking into your life. And the second is this: there is this amazing life. There is this pinnacle of not achievement, but fulfillment, which, that those areas, right, Brian and Tara, it's that this is exactly who I was created to be. And I could spend my whole day doing it, the times where you're losing track of time and you're just fully energized, and, you don't need coffee, you don't need energy drinks, you're just there. That, I believe, is a life that everybody is meant to live, a life of freedom, a life of what I call the life mastery life. So there's limitations that we all have unless we're living from a place of who we're created to be.
Yeah, thank you. That's so beautiful. I'm already so inspired by your words, your presence. Thank you for being here. So, where does this identity come from? We know a little bit, you and I and Brian and many of our listeners and your audience, I'm sure, as well. The caregivers, the socialization, is it from there? And how's our identity formed? And where do we go from that conditioned place?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tara. And as you know, with all of the extensive work that you do, what I tell the people I work with in very simplistic terms is you're either living from who you're created to be, as I said, or what your life has told you are. And we could kind of unpack that in some of my own areas of challenge, right? Where I was growing up and not doing too well academically in school, and the message that you're given, whether it's externally through your teachers, your fellow students, or whoever, your parents, unfortunately, is you're not as smart as. Right. And there's this identity statement that we take through our experiences, whether they're good or bad, and that informs who we believe we are for the rest of our life. And so that young person who believes that they're not smart in the academic fields, it may not be the truth. It just may be a temporary condition of, intellectual superiority of the people around them. But in that place, it's a lifelong understanding of, no, I'm not as smart as. And the interesting thing is, you live it out in the rest of the things that you do, in the activities that you don't try, in the things that you don't engage in those promotions, those jobs, that relationship, those things where you already know you're going to be a failure going into it. And so you self-sabotage and or you guard yourself against it. So for me, it really comes from that childhood. I could talk about, other things and what have you, but what it really comes down to is your life telling you who you are, or your created value telling you who you are. Of course, I'm a person of faith, so there's a bit of a source that I could go to and get that understanding. But what I do is try and help my people to first off unpack what you believe your identity is so that we can actually start to explore what it truly is. And for us, that's with an I am statement. So it's saying, who are you apart from? Your roles, your title, your income, your position, your possessions, all those things that we believe, these things make me. If you strip all those away, what's left? What that is left with is the person that you actually are. Those things that you have are an outworking of who you are created to be lived out. They're not your identity to affirm who you are. We start with that and do some other tools as well to really start to unpack some things. And then from there, you start to understand, okay, well, if this is who I'm created to be, then how do I live that out? And we have some other strategies and things that we use to try and make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds powerful. It also sounds terrifying, empathizing with the people that have so many layers that they have to remove, and they're basically naked with their true identity, or where you're trying to get them to. Because I would imagine that a lot of people are kind of using these socially created, culturally created, familial created identities kind of as a shield, right? Because maybe they're not comfortable with where you're trying to get them, or they're just afraid of what they'll find, right? I mean, that's got to be a challenge.
Yeah, that's really interesting point. And it's interesting because, my book title is Life Mastery, Living Life by Design and Not by Default. And what I find with the people I work with is the same thing I found in my own life was I thought there was no other way. Life by default is kind of that default mechanism that we live with, which means this, I'm mostly left with who I am. And at the end of the day, what I need to do is manage it and manage it to the best of my ability, fight off those things that are having a negative impact, try and, engage in those things that have a positive impact, and hope one weighs out the other. And I have at least, the life that I'm hoping for. And the interesting thing is, you said I'm a business and life coach, and why I chose business as well was because when I was starting to get in business, I had a successful business. And the fascinating thing I think I mentioned earlier was even my own life and some of the clients that I had, I thought success would overcome fear of failure, imposter syndrome, and insecurity, the things that I was wrestling with in my own life. Again, my past telling me what my present was and informing my future. But I found out that success doesn't anesthetize you against the emotions that you're dealing with. It just covers them up so that everybody else thinks you're successful, while you understand that if they only knew me on the inside, if they only knew me at 3:00 in the morning as I woke up in terror because of whatever financial issue or, vocational challenge that I'm walking into. But in that place, what I found was there's an aha moment of, oh, what? So I don't have to just deal with my life. I don't have to just manage my anger, my worry, my fear, my stress. There's an actual system. There's a blueprint that can actually make me change. But you're right also, Brian, that there's this place of bravery, because part of the things that you and Tara know, I'm sure, very well, is that in order to become the person you're created to be, you have to overcome the lies you've believed. And those lies are tied to hurts and experiences and challenge in your life. And what I tell the people I work with is we never ignore your past and say it doesn't matter. We never say get over it. None of those things have worked anyway. You guys know that. But what we give them the ability to do is have tools and strategies so that your past doesn't tell you who you are anymore. It doesn't take away those challenges. Authentically, challenge happens, hurt happens, grief happens, all those things happen in our lives. It's not minimizing or ignoring them. It's just saying that those are experiences I'm walking through. And if I can walk in through them with the truth, and the truth is using the experience as an experience, not having the experience give me an identity that I walk forward in for the rest of my life. In that place, there's a freedom that happens. So there's a pain point, there's a challenge walking into struggles of the past, but there's a freedom that you can't imagine when you're set free from things you thought you were limited by.
Yeah, that's so well articulated. Thank you for that response. What really stuck out to me was this notion of stress management, anger management, this, even emotional regulation or balance. And so we're kind of missing something right here in our mainstream society. So I have a question on, can you speak a little bit more to that not feeling our feelings, or white knuckling it, getting past it. How do we begin to change the paradigm, change the conversation in that, feelings can be processed. We can feel them. We can move past them. We can dig deeper. We don't have to have this success looks one way. Ultimately, does anyone have it all figured out? The person that looks like they have it all, right? Does anyone have it really all figured out? And two, how do we change the narrative? Like, you're doing a wonderful job, but the average folks like us and people that want to look deeper, where do they begin? Is it church? Is it religion? Is it a class? Is it a course? Like, how do we begin? And also, can you speak to this illusion that there are these people up here that have it all figured out?
Yeah, gosh, there's just a lot there. Thank you for that. So I'll take three different parts of it. So first off, there's a reason why everything we talk about in the work that I do in my course, Life Mastery, in the book as well, talks about a life mastery journey. Because it is a journey. We could go to the religious aspect, and I'd certainly, we'd be happy to have that conversation of, this process of what it calls in the Bible sanctification. And so for sanctification and a religious perspective for people of faith is becoming more and more like God. The problem, well, not the problem is, but the inaccuracy is that we don't realize that it's also becoming more and more like who you're created to be, not the person that you believed you were. But it's a journey over time. Those things that we talked about, right? I talked about the school and the challenges and that wasn't a theory. That was me living out my own life and going from the first to the second grade in a room with my teacher and my parents, where my teacher was expressing he's not ready for that next grade. The identity, a statement that little 6-7-year-old boy heard was, I'm not as smart as everybody else. And it was something that was carried out throughout my life. Well, I mean, it affected me in academics. In even in my relationship with my wife, if I could tell a funny story, for many years in our relationship, my wife, she thinks I'm the answer man, which is awesome. The problem is that there's this young man on the inside with this understanding I'm not as smart as everybody else. So when she would ask me to fix something or to help her with her phone or things like that, there would just be this immediate anger that came up, because who you believe you are, you'll become. And when you think you're not as smart, any challenge with something you don't have all the knowledge of, all of a sudden it's an opportunity for you to be proven right in that place of not believing who you are. Well, that entered in through all of our relationship up until you have those epiphanies, those understandings, and you start to bring truth where there were lies, and it automatically dissolves the issue. But that was a place of many years of living out a relationship, not understanding truth, and living out of a lie. And so this is a journey, and I don't know anybody who's perfectly there, but I work with a lot of people, and I myself, and of course you guys, in the way that you overcome those circumstances and situations, you're walking towards that journey. There's no perfect ending. There's no person who has it all together. And the people that you think do, you don't understand the background work that they're either doing or not doing. They either put on a great shell or they present who they are right now. We just don't understand the road they've taken to get here and the place where they're at in their journey. So that is for sure. It is a journey. It's not a moment in time, and it's not a destination. There are moments of miraculous happenings within it that make the process absolutely worth it. But there's always that next layer, that next level of understanding, that next level of saying, oh, well, I believe that, and that's why this happened. And to kind of encapsulate that story I just told you, that is the process super generally for what we walk through. The thing about emotion that's really amazing, as I tell the people I work with, is it's a huge flag that's telling you there's something you get the opportunity to deal with. Whether it's dealing with anger in a relationship and on the inside, hey, why did I respond that way? Or being in business and having this fear or this insecurity that's happening when you're having to make a business deal, or there's a financial downturn, or you're struggling in some way, whatever it is. When things are great, nobody thinks they have any issues. When challenges come up, that's when you start to see those flags come up that say, hey, I'm dealing with this thing here. And so for us, it's, there's those strategies of unpacking it. We call it the 4 pillars of life mastery. You're either living from identity. I'll give you the 4 pillars: identity, experience, meaning, and emotion. You're either living from identity or you're living from your experience, and not the experience you're currently walking through, but what your past has told you your present is going to turn out like. And so what we do is we use that emotion, anger, worry, insecurity, fear, anxiety, control, whatever the thing is that you're working on, to be a flag that says, hey, there's something going on here. And then you start to unpack it. Hey, because the challenge is it's not the experience that you walk through, it's the meaning that you give it. And it's not the meaning of the experience, because people walk through horrible, tragic things, but create a meaning that empowers them to be resilient and to move forward and to succeed despite. The challenge is the meaning that we give it about us. It's not the meaning of the circumstances. What did my experience tell me about me? When my wife is asking me, hey, fix my phone. Well, I've got an iPhone, you've got an Android. I don't know how to use that. I've never even looked at a phone like that, right? What does that meaning say about me? Well, I'm not as smart as, what is this going to happen if I don't do it? She's going to think I'm stupid. I'm going to feel like I'm an idiot. And whatever the things you tell yourself on the inside, or you unconsciously believe and emotionally express without actually verbalizing. So that meaning is, what does it say about me? And what I tell the people I work with is the emotion is the only honest thing in it. Because the emotion, if I was somebody who was made to feel shameful or look like really I was a foolish individual, then a feeling of anger or hurt or disappointment would be accurate and appropriate. The challenge is when it's not something that's going to have that response, then those emotions really inherently undermine the life that you're supposed to live. So for us, it's understanding that. It's using that emotion as a flag and saying, okay, one of the questions we use to really kind of unpack it a little bit is, you're feeling like you're foolish. You're feeling like you're not as smart as everybody else. Where did that emotion first happen in your life? We deal with, in my work, we deal with what we call roots, not fruits. That the management thing that you talked about is really dealing with the fruit. Manage the emotion, right? Manage the anger, manage the insecurity, right? Speak those things over yourself when those things happen. In Christianity, even we're not oblivious to it, right? Those scriptures that you just throw out when things happen to try and remind yourself of who you are. And what I call it is, you just beat your thoughts up until they submit. But we deal with the roots, which is saying this: hey, where did you first feel that emotion? Where did you first have that identity feeling in your life? Because that's where that identity started. And then we deal with two things. What's the lie you believed at that time? That young boy in first grade going into second grade with the teacher saying he wasn't ready or mature enough to go into class. The lie I believed was, I'm not as smart as everybody else, and I'm never going to be. And what's the truth you know? That young boy back then, as an adult looking back with the truth and understanding of life mastery, was that was a stage I was at in my life. Afterwards, through struggle and challenge and issue, but also through victory and healing in the life mastery journey, I went to college. I got a college degree. This class I had struggled with was math. Well, in college, I went all the way in math. Didn't need to, but I wanted to prove myself to myself. And I took calculus and got a passing grade. And so it wasn't that you weren't smart.
Nice.
It's that at that moment in time, you weren't weren't educationally mature enough. It didn't mean that's a lifetime of limit. It just meant that was a moment in your life. So I hope that kind of unpacks some of the things we do to walk through it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was so perfectly said. Two things that really came out at me was when people that have it all together, either they're very good at disguising it or they've done a lot of work to get there, right? So it's almost like you can choose one of those more or less to scale. Those people that you perhaps admire or see something in them that maybe you don't see in yourself just quite yet. And then also, that was so beautiful, that emotion is honest, right? It's honest and it's true, and that it's actually an opportunity, right?
Yeah.
So there's an opportunity behind the emotion. It doesn't need to be shoved down. You don't need to swallow, to swallow it or push it down or try to, analyze it or make it go away. Talk yourself out of it. Like that's so beautiful and so powerful. And also the lies that we maybe told ourselves because we didn't know what else to do per se. This is so beautifully put together. Where do people go once they have grounding in this? So they come to you and they take the course. Like, how have they changed? How has this changed their life, their perception, maybe the people around them? Can you give an example of what might come of it? I mean, I
Yeah.
obviously am very passionate about this, so I'm a little biased, but
Yeah.
how could this help somebody that hasn't maybe dove into this so deeply quite yet?
Yeah, that's a great question. A couple of students always come to mind. One was in the business and one was in the relational realm. I had a client, still a current client named Brett, who has been highly successful in business. He was actually bivocational. So he was a pastor at his church and he had his own businesses, doing multi-million dollar, business deals, real estate deals, and those kind of things. From the outside, he looked like a guy who had it all together. When I, met him and had relationship and started to gain a friendship with him, working in the things that I did, he looked on the outside like a guy who's got it all together. Great family, great attitude, great outlook, highly successful, very respected, and all of those things. He was exactly like me on the inside, though. Like I said, with the business success I had, fear of failure and those other things came along for the ride. That was exactly what he was dealing with. Those identity statements in his life and past challenges and failures, I say that in quotations, telling him who he was. And so he was in business and he was doing some very large deals. I was impressed with the level of, business income and accomplishment he had. The challenge was success was never really success, but it was really a relief. Because when you are worried about fear of failure, your success and the excitement for it only happens for a moment because I have to do this again. It's not a one time for all in anybody in business. And to be totally honest, as I'm sure you've probably had these conversations as well, I had this 670, well, he was a 9-figure multimillionaire, hugely successful. And he said this thing that really astounded me. He was talking about fear of failure and how he still gets fear of failure every time he walks into a business deal and is working towards, getting that thing accomplished. And he said this thing that stunned me. He said, I guess that's just part of the journey. Again, like we talked about earlier on, right? It's this, I guess, this is just what I need to manage to get to that place. And I was like, oh my gosh, you are so off base. We do this thing, Tara, and you know this already, where we manage the things we have the ability to master. And the same thing happened with Brett, where you were managing things in your life where, like you guys already know, business success is hard enough. There's challenges that come and there's things to overcome and decisions to make and pivoting moments and all of that stuff. And the problem is, it's like driving your car with the brake on when you're dealing with these emotional challenges, dysfunctions, whatever the verbiage is you want to use for it. You're still successful, but you're also exhausted because emotionally, people don't realize in most cases, or at least you don't think they do, that those things are happening. So for Brett, there was this great level of success, but there was the what you could call the torment on the inside, the things that he wasn't sharing with his wife or business partners or the people he was around, that feeling of this is just, this is the one where I'm going to get exposed and not being as good as whoever. And so it was more exhausting than it was enriching in his life. And the byproduct is, like with all of us, we think we can compartmentalize our life where stress at work doesn't become anger at home, or, that detached, demeanor that you have with your family because you're not engaged because you're still at work mentally when you're there physically. And so for him, it was really that thing that you and I talked about, Brian, earlier. It was this self-limiting belief where you're kind of successful, but not as much as you could be because you don't pull the trigger on things that could be concerning. You don't pull the trigger on things that could expose you, right? You reach out, but only so far, because you know that if I go too far, it's not because intellectual ability or, business sense. They have all of that in place. It's this self-governor that says, I can't get out there too far because what happens if something happens? And the byproduct for him was also a man who was engaged in his household, who wasn't just there physically, but, and he's a good father and husband. He wasn't a horrible person, but, you're in those places in relationship where there's just not a connection, where you just can't share the whole life. The byproduct and the interesting thing, Tara, is this. A lot of time, the thing is, we don't want people to know what's going on the inside. And one of the amazing things, whether you're a successful business person or somebody else I could talk about, is there's this place of, I am not just okay with me, but I actually love who I am. And in that place, I'm not hiding it from my business partner, and I'm not hiding it from those people I care for most. because I'm not afraid of what the result is and what they're going to think about me. I'm fully engaged and fully alive in who I am. And because of that, I actually can be fully engaged and fully alive in my marriage and with my kids and in my business. And then success turns to flourishing, which turns to fulfillment. And that's exactly what it was in his life. His business success escalated, but the thing he told me that mattered more was his ability to know that in all of these things, whether I succeed or fail in my business, I am exactly who I'm created to be. And when you don't have those burdens, right, driving the car with the brakes on, now all of a sudden your life can be not just, financially and vocationally amazing, but amazing at every level.
Wow. Yeah. Really impactful stuff there. We've talked about imposter syndrome a couple times, or around it. Can
Yeah.
you kind of flesh it out, identify it for the uninitiated? Let us know, what are some of the characteristics. And on a part B to that is there a pattern, a group, a specific demo where you see it manifest itself more often than not? Is it the underemployed? Is it young men? Is it I don't know. I don't even know. Is it just across the board? So two things. Could you kind of explain it for the audience a little bit? And is there a specific group of people that you see imposter system more prevalent than others?
That's a great question, Brian. And yeah, I think it is. For me, so imposter syndrome itself is really feeling unqualified for where you're at. So where you're at could be your position at work. It could be who you are as a business owner. It could be in your relationship in marriage, right? Or whatever the thing is that you're doing. Parenting. I told a story. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and I told them one of the most unqualified moments of my life that I felt so deeply was when my daughter was born and the nurse handed her to me for the first time. I was 20, 29 years old, knowing that I had no clue how to be a father, how to even take care of this daughter of mine, how to change diapers, how to feed her, how to do whatever, right? Well, imagine that circumstance when people are asking you to give a presentation in a boardroom, or you're promoted into a managerial role and you're overseeing people that you're trying to grow a team, change a team, do whatever. Business ownership, even in marriage, right? Feeling you're unqualified in the relationship. It's really, as in always all these cases, it's an identity statement, right? That young man that we talked about, myself, right? There's those moments of imposter syndrome where you're given the ability to take care of the finances of a business. Well, hold on, math isn't my thing. I'm not good at that. I'm not ready for this, right? And then, forgot to pay a bill, and that's a reminder that that's who you are. We didn't get that sale, so now we're struggling to try and figure out how to pay all our debts and pay our employees and all of that. Well, there again, there's another one of those confirmations, right? Imposter syndrome is, I'm not good enough for where I'm at. And the interesting thing is, fear of failure manifests itself for me with people who aren't going to reach out. They're not going to try. They're not going to strive. They're not going to aim higher. They're not going to grab farther. They're going to make sure that they can control their environment. What I tell people that I work with is, it's the wall you put around yourself to make sure that you can control the outcome. Imposter syndrome is a little bit different. Where I really find that it happens is where it happened with me, which is when you believe there is more and you're reaching out for it, right? You're stretching just beyond what you think you're capable of. Or you have this sense of, I could start a business and I could be really good at, or I could get that promotion, or maybe I could get that job, right? It's that next step up, that next thing that I want to do. Or, you aim really high and with your spouse, you're like, wow, she is, really amazing. And I'm not, I'm not a CEO, but I'm going to go for it, right? It's that place where you're stretching yourself beyond what's comfortable, where imposter syndrome comes in. And it's in that place where I don't have all the answers, right? I have to figure it out as I go. I have to kind of learn on the job, so to speak, whether it's parenting, whether it's in marriage, whether it's in business or a job. So it is in that place where people stretch out. And that's a lot of the people that work with me, right? If I'm comfortable with my life, if I'm able to control everything, I'm typically not going to really reach out for something to change. If I'm settled for where I'm at, and that's what I try to do, is ignite people so they don't. But if you're in that place where everything feels good and all the bills are paid and all the answers are had, well, then I'm not probably going to do it. But for those individuals who are reaching a little farther, looking a little higher, first and foremost, I would tell them, go for it, because you're probably right? and you've overcome the fear long enough to at least try. But in that place, then it's trying to figure out, okay, well, how do we start to unpack those things? Well, we've already covered some of those tools, but it really comes down to an identity statement. I tell my people that I talk to all the time, my students especially, I say, I don't have a tattoo, but if my wife let me have one, it would be this: identity is everything. If you understand who you're created to be, your world doesn't have to make up the difference. If you don't understand who you're created to be, then your world does.
Yeah, so true. And before Tara gets in here, it is so true, and both of you have touched on this, how there's so much more to it than just the imposter syndrome. It's not one situation, it's not a thing at
Yeah.
work, and it's how we've kind of rationalized our inability
Yeah.
to do things by saying, well, oh, Jim will do the presentation because he's just good at that. He's just good at talking in front of people. That's just not my thing. And it's so toxic how if you allow it to get a hold, it can translate. Because I can think about being a teacher, and then you can imagine not having, say, control, not having a great lesson, or not having control of a class, and then you get home and you have your children, and then you're thinking, well, I couldn't handle these kids at school. And then you go maybe to do some coaching.
Right.
And now you're really questioning yourself all the way throughout. So it's not those situations or scenarios like you guys have intimated. It's really you, and it's really your identity. And you got to get a hold of it before it's cancerous and it takes over. Tara? Sorry,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mark.
No, I was going to say, and this is the amazing thing about starting with identity, is it impacts every area of your life.
Right.
Just like you said in the challenging side of it, when I'm dealing with imposter syndrome or whatever, you just you just laid out 3 or 4 different scenarios where now this goes to this, and then it goes to that area, and then it goes to that area. You're absolutely right. But on the other side, when you can take that foundation of identity, who you're created to be, you're absolutely right. It affects every area of your life. And so we talk about 5 areas of life mastery, and I'll stop with that and let Tara step in. But what the core of it is your identity. We talk about in us 5 areas of life mastery: spiritually, relationally, vocationally, physically, and financially. And who you are in one area is who you are in all the areas. So like you said, when you start to unpack those things, when you start to unleash, like I talked about earlier, the hero in hiding, the person you're actually created to be, like with that gentleman, Brett, that I talked about, it affected every area of his life. It affected him as a pastor, as a business leader, as a husband, as a father, as a friend, because that same guy showed up in every area, the man he was created to be, not the one his past told him he was. It's profound, Brian. So that was really, really a good point that you had.
Yeah, that's such a wonderful way to explain imposter syndrome as well. So could you say that in some ways it can be healthy, right? It doesn't have to be a syndrome in that if there's something wrong with somebody. Anytime we do something for the first time, it's probably going to evoke a little bit of trepidation, a little bit of fear, and that's part of being a human. And I think maybe society sometimes goes against the actual the humanness of us in some ways. So what about the notion of just be good at one thing and just focus on that, and you'll succeed in life? Like, is there truth to that, or how is that actually a little bit different in if you are actually true in your identity, then everything else will come into play, as opposed to, like we spoke a little bit about, work-life balance, right? Is there such a thing as this work-life balance that I'm still trying to figure out? Because I don't think that it has to be this either or, one or the other. But if we're really solid in who we are, if we're really present and we really know our identity, probably very similar to the way that you teach it, that we can be in flow, that we can live in integrity, that we can be present, and we don't have to look externally. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And, so work-life balance, I would say this, and don't mean to offend anybody, but there's nobody of any great accomplishment in any area at any time that has ever lived who had work-life balance. I'm just going to, and I say that because I'm a person of passion, and I've got the things, obviously you understand what I'm passionate about. But it doesn't mean ignoring the rest of your life. But what it does mean is that, like you talked about, flow is such a great way of putting it, right? It's the thing we're talking about. I mean, it's a different way of saying what I talked about: life mastery, living out who you're created to be in every area of your life. It is really that person showing up in all those things that you talked about. So, but yeah, that's the interesting thing, is this place of understanding who you are in all areas of life. So you already know, like I do, Tara, that success is either an outcome of who you're created to be or a substitute for it. And why I say that is, we could name people first name, last name, already know them at the top of our head, who have been successful at something and a disaster at others, or successful at something and then made choices that harm themselves physically because that thing was a substitute for who they were. And when that substitution didn't change who I am on the inside, all of a sudden you had nothing to go to really make a difference and actually make that change. So what I tell the people I work with is, we don't tell you to go for success, because success is really just me working hard enough, long enough, outworking the people around me, and eventually becoming better at it than anybody else. And that's great. There's a skill set in that. The problem is that there's a difference between that and fulfillment. Fulfillment is me living at the maximum level I was created to be in that endeavor, in that thing, in whatever I have. So my goal isn't being better than you. My goal is being the best me that I can be. And at the end of the day, the difference between the two is, when I'm trying to be better than you, then you're my goal. You're the identity I'm trying to reach. And it's as empty as it sounds when I just said it. But when I live from the place of who I'm created to be, it's that point we talked about earlier, right? It's that this is exactly who I am. This is exactly the person that I am lived out. And in that place, it's not just a success as a dollar amount or an accomplishment or a title that you have at the end of your name. It's this is really me living me. And in that place, everything changes. And so I'm not focused on one thing and ignore the rest of my life to its detriment, but I'm maximizing who I am in that one area. As we talked about, that we have 5 areas that we invite people to have goals with. And I'm that same guy in the other areas as well. Who I am and the things I'm passionate about in my business is the exact same person who is passionate about his marriage, his spiritual walk, his physical health, his relational, conversations and interactions. The thing that doesn't change is who you are. The environment of what portion of my life am I investing me into does. It's in that place that you find the life that you're created for, not in reaching for one goal. It's not bad to have goals. I have goals in each of the 5 areas. I have things that I'm striving for in next level of me manifesting in those areas in every area of my life. I'm not saying there's a challenge with goals. It's if the goal is me needing that to be who I am versus accomplishing that because of who I am.
Awesome. So could you quickly maybe distinguish between goal and intention? Because we do think of goals as, I'm going to get it, I'm going to be happy. So yeah. Could you speak to a combination of them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's look at it in 2 ways. I want to make $1 million. Right. So whatever it is, I'm in business, I'm in art, I'm an artist, I'm whatever the thing is that I'm doing to get that level of income. So somebody can have a goal of reaching that monetary value. I want $1 million. Right. And at that point, I've got the $1 million, and more times than not, I haven't found a person actually who has those types of goals, who doesn't reach it and find out that it's really lacking. First off, there is that great accomplishment of, I did it. I made that thing. The problem is, I expected all the other things to come along with it. Now I'm a person of worth. Now I'm a person of value. Now I'm going to be respected. Now I'll have made it. And so that goal was the thing, right? And so that's goals in general and what most people do. That intention is a really good one, because it starts with a different question, not what's the most money I can make, but what is the highest level I can live? And so what does that look like in business? For me, that looks like Life Mastery, my course, all the things I do underneath the umbrella of our Freedom for Life business. What is the highest level that I'm created to invest in and see accomplishment in this business? The outcome could very well be a guy who makes $1 million and affects thousands and thousands of people worldwide. But it didn't start with me having that outcome and that goal. It started with me saying, what is the maximum level I can live? And what do I need to do to become that person? What mindsets do I have? For us, it comes through mastering your thoughts, words, and actions and walking towards that. So it's probably a subject for another day. But so the intention is not a tangible outcome but an internal conclusion. And in that place, I naturally get to that place because I'm not hindering myself and I'm not using that as an identity statement. I'm understanding I'm made for this level of life, whatever that life is. And it's not arrogance, because that kind of can sound like it, but it really is saying, what's the most I can do? What's the most I can be? What's the most I can accomplish? Because it's that place that fulfillment happens.
Yeah, and I actually really like that in place of the why, right? Like, why do you want the $1 million? Because now you're putting in like your true identity in with it, right? So you can say, well, I want $1 million, so life will be easy. And so maybe that's like one notch like closer. But why do you want life to be easy? But there's still a disconnect. So what I love so much about your program is you're really honing it down so it becomes about us. And like you said, it does almost seem to maybe others that it's almost self-indulgent, but the funny thing is it's actually quite the opposite, right? Because can you speak to how when we find our identity, how when we really anchor down in this, like there's a ripple effect around those around us?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, because it comes down to different things like my marriage. I tell people this all the time, and I say this, and I don't mean to minimize it, but what I tell people is this: I have a wife. We've been married 33 years this Christmas Eve, actually. What I tell people is this: that my wife is a great addition to my life. She's not a necessity.
She couldn't say no on Christmas Eve. Come on.
That's right.
It was 35 years ago, and we couldn't afford to have a vacation and a wedding, so we chose to do both at the same time. But what I tell people is my wife is a benefit to my life. She's not a necessity. And that can kind of freak some people out, because they're like, oh no, she's my everything, she's my all. Believe me, my wife, I am who I am in my life, and my life is as good as it is because of the wife I have and all the things that she's given me. But here's the truth of the matter: she's not a necessity, she's a benefit. And because we have that relationship, it doesn't mean I don't value her. What it does mean is I don't get my identity from her. And in that place, because I don't get my identity from her, I have permission to be exactly who I'm created to be. And she has the permission to be exactly who she's created to be. Because just like with work, business, and the rest of your life, if I don't know who I'm created to be, if I don't live from who I'm created to be, my wife has to make up the difference. And so if she has to make up the difference, then our life has to be perfect, and we can't have stress and we can't have challenge, because those things are going to bring shame and worry and fear and insecurity and those things that could come up in that place. But when I know who I am, I don't need her to make up any difference. And in that place, we can have what is the most healthy and whole and engaging relationship that we could ever have. So what does that look like lived out in, the intention in all of life? Well, when I bring me into every relationship, nobody else has to make up any difference. And in that place, we can actually engage in something that is vulnerable, that is honest, that is open, that is more than we could have if I came in needing something from you so that I can feel something about me. So yeah, that intention, it happens in every area of your life, in relationship and what have you. And the outcome is who I am showing up. I tell people this: you're the answer to the circumstance you're walking into. You're not the question to be figured out. You're the answer to be unleashed. And in that place, who I am in my marriage, what's the answer I'm bringing into the marriage? It's who I am. It's fully investing. It's giving everything I have and seeing in her the things that she has, right? Not the things I need from her, but the things I value about her. And it can happen in a multitude of ways, in a multitude of different areas. But it starts with, like you said, who you are showing up there.
Awesome. I do have a couple more before we sign off, because you have just so much knowledge and practical advice. First is, when you start to ascend, when you get success stories, or maybe even personally you have practice you'd like to share, what can be done to mitigate falling back into bad habits and losing your identity, right? Because I would imagine that once you read the book, once you complete the course, it's not like, well, I'm done now. Got my identity. I'm good to go. Is it prayer? Is it meditation? How do you remind yourself? How do you strengthen that newfound, that core to make sure you don't kind of revert back to these multiple false identities?
Gosh, that's a great question. And I'll say it really quickly, because we do have 14 lessons in 3 different spheres. The first will be identity. The second is our transformational strategies, mastering your thoughts, words, and actions. And the third is the 4 pillars of life mastery. identity, experience, meaning, and emotion. And so I'm going to encapsulate a couple of things really quickly. The first is identity, and what we talk about. And to backtrack really quickly. So I am a person of faith. I am a Christian. And so there are biblical truths and instructions in each one of the lessons. But whether you are a Christian or not, or recognize it or not, or know it, what I tell people is this: truth is universal and it works even if you don't know the source of it. So the instructions and the strategies work even if you're not a person of faith like I am. So let me get that, I don't want to say get it out of the way, but that's kind of the foundation. But we start with identity, and we talked about I am statement. I invite them to do an I am statement, to create a celebration list and an accomplishment list. The celebration list is not what I've done that I really love, but what I see in myself that I really love. And in that place, you start to see that you're more than the things you do, and you have value more than the things you accomplish. And we do that because it's a paradigm shift away from a lot of what everybody else thinks. And even if we do believe, no, I'm good, even if I don't do this stuff, you still grade yourself by the things you do. And so that's the first one. And then the other one is the accomplishment list, because a lot of times people feel like they need to have the Super Bowl, the World Cup, the Olympic gold medal before they have value, not realizing that accomplishment happens on a daily basis, on a decision by decision basis. And in that place, you're already accomplishing things throughout your day. And so we show that you already have a track record of success before you've even started your day. So you take those three encapsulated, and that starts what we call the identity statement. And I say that because those things, the mantras, the affirmations, and the things, I start with who I am, and I remind myself of that until I see that guy show up in my work, in my business, in my relationships. And in that place, anger starts to dissipate, and fear stops waking me up in the middle of the night, and insecurity stops showing up when I have to make a presentation, or I'm in a confrontation, or I have a challenge that I have to figure an answer for. So in those places, it's not really habits, because what I tell people is this: the habit I use to get there is the habit I'm going to have to maintain to stay there. And so we don't give you habits to have to maintain for a lifetime. We give you tools of transition to give you a transformation, so that your thoughts are changed, your words are changed, and your actions are changed. And what I tell the people I work with and they see in their own lives, Brian, is this: when I understand who I'm created to be, I don't have to remind myself of who I am. I just have to live from that place. And so there are these transitional tools that we use in strategies, mastering your thoughts, words, and actions, so that I can remind myself who I am, so that I can speak those things out, and so I can take actions as that person. And when that guy starts to show up, there's a momentum of truth and life mastery that happens that starts to snowball. So I'm living as that person. I'm not reminding myself and working myself up to be that person, right? There's programs and things, and they have value at a level, but sometimes we have these systems that we put in place where it's, you got to work yourself up to be that person of energy, be that person of whatever the thing is, that trait is that you think you need. Really, it's imitating somebody else because we don't believe who we are. But in that place of the tools and the ways that we put them together and we step them from one to the other, you start to live out who you are, and that person shows up. I tell people this in closing out this thought: living from life mastery is the easiest thing to do, because I'm literally just living from who I'm created to be. Living when you're not using life mastery is the hardest thing, because I'm always trying to measure up.
And how beautiful and how refreshing of a message that is we almost don't have to do anything, in a sense. That and don't get me wrong, I mean, like you said, there's a time and a place for a lot of these practices and a lot of these stepping stones. But what a beautiful message that ultimately, once we have our identity, the practice is so natural. Like, we just have to be ourselves. And that, like, that's such a relatively simple idea, but to me, like I said, it's refreshing and it's free, and it's almost a little bit against the norm of going, striving, trying, even the, like, our Maslow's hierarchy of needs that we talk about, self-actualization's at the top. It's like, oh, let me get there. Like, I mean, and guilty as charged. It's like trying to attain something. But when I am, in my flow, I take a step back. It's like, oh, there's nothing to do. So, thank you so much for articulating that. And thank you for everything that you're doing and all of the work. One quick question I like to ask all of our guests: is there a book that you recommend, fiction, nonfiction, could have had a really big it could have been very pivotal in your transformational journey? It could just be a quirky book that you'd recommend for our listeners.
Yeah, well, as a person of faith, the first book I would invite anybody to start reading is the Bible. It is the foundation of everything I write. Even if scriptures aren't used, scriptures are intertwined in what I talk about. So for sure, if you're a person of faith or somebody who wants to see universal truths that have happened over time, please start there. Gosh, there's so many books I've read, because until I was able to create Life Mastery, I tried to find help and well-being in all of them. And I love all of them. I love Napoleon Hill. I love Andrew Schwartz. I love Dale Carnegie. I haven't read a book in a while because I'm investing in the things that I'm doing. But the foundational ones that really started me on my journey were, how to win friends and influence people, right? Richest Man in Babylon, to try and get some mindsets that you don't have to be in poverty the rest of your life. Napoleon Hill's work was just phenomenal in being able to interview, at the time, the richest people in the world and see the commonality of habits and mindsets and thought processes that they had. Tony Robbins, a person that I've learned a lot from, obviously a pillar in the industry of personal development. So anything that he does, I know he's kind of invested more in towards the money aspect of it and investing in those kind of things, but his early work is great as well. I don't have a particular title that was that pivotal one other than the first one I talked about, but there's much good out there and you can take nuggets from each of them.
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, I think that might be our best answer so far is the Bible. Pick up the Bible. I've never heard somebody that'd be like, that book, that stunk. So, let's just leave it at that. But also, yes, Napoleon Hill, just the notion that money is not evil, in another, maybe negative indoctrination that we get. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a couple closing tips, if you would. How can we get people the parents out there to, when they have their kids, they're growing up, they're coming into their formative years, teenage years, or, even younger than that, in fact.
Yeah.
You and Tara both really look to the past and kind of fixing that or working through that or recognizing it and trying to move forward so it doesn't, negatively affect your future. What can parents do to kind of help their children develop the identity so that, at least when they come to Mark Collins, they're not totally lost. They have maybe they have some, or maybe God willing, they don't even need to come to you, right? So what can parents do to help them recognize that they have this identity, this core, and maybe just kind of help the world, because if we raise our children with that knowledge, they'll become better adults, or at least they'll find their way quicker.
Yeah, that's a great question, Brian. So I would probably say two things. The first is I tell people that I work with that are parents that my responsibility as a father for my children is to speak the truth of who they're created to be until they see it in themselves. And so as a parent, it really is saying, again, a man of faith, I can start with God and say, God, who did you make my daughter to be? Alyssa's our youngest, the one that I was holding that I had no qualification for. But it's really being able to have a heart for your children, not to give them a report card of their actions. You're doing right, you're doing wrong. Doesn't mean there's not discipline. I'm all for discipline. But at the end of the day, if all I'm doing is disciplining you so you do right and wrong, I'm not investing in you for who you are. And so for me, it's understanding, again, who are you created to be, speaking it out over them until they see it in themselves. And in that place, really trying to raise them with tools to start to see that. My daughter, before she was an adult, I was talking to her about value. One of my favorite cars is a Lamborghini. Back in the old days, the old Countach, which actually made a resurgence, but those beautiful, amazing race cars, to me, they're just a work of art. I'm maybe a nerd like that, but I'm that kind of guy. But what I talked to my daughter about was that's who she is. She's this highly fine-tuned, expensive, one-of-a-kind machine. And so we talked about relationship and how me as a father, I wouldn't want her to be rented, used, devalued, taken for a test drive or whatever the circumstances that you want to talk about, because she has too much of a value to be tried out before she was given to the one she was created for. And so it's in those kind of stories and analogies that you start to try and impart a value, not just the value that I see, but the value that I desire for you to see in yourself. In that place, it's not a vocation, it's not an educational level, it's not an income level, it's a value statement. Because I know that if I can give her the tools to see that in herself, then, like we talked about throughout this whole conversation, everything else will come into place for her. I won't have to continue to hold her up in her life. She'll walk into adulthood being fully formed in a place of understanding her identity. It's, it's in the small things and saying that. It's in those times where you celebrate them for who they are. You tell them what you love about them, not an accomplishment that they do, but a character trait that isn't something they had to earn, but simply them living out who they are. It's in those things that you try, at least from my perspective, you invest in your children. That gives them the best advantage to be in the best place growing up. And, secondarily, just to tell you, whoever you are out there listening to this and you're a parent who hasn't done it all right, neither have I. And I don't know anybody who has, who's been perfect, right? But you, again, like with that child that I felt unqualified to parent, you do the very best you can to give them the very best advantage in their life in those places, knowing that the rest of it, they'll figure it out on their own. They'll have their own life mastery journey to make up, for those areas that they needed.
Beautiful.
Absolutely. That's a great way to close it. And one of the things that I love about your mission and your writing and your program is the hope. There's so much hope, and you really have high expectations for your clients. And I think that anyone that connects with you, it's not just Band-Aids. It's building something so much more than that. And that's really incredible stuff. We have been joined today by Mark Collins. Mark, where can people find out how to grab the book online, how to connect with you, and can you give us a little sneak peek of what they should expect when they reach your website?
Yeah, absolutely. So everything I have is on my website. I try and be a one-stop shop. So the website is freedom-4-life.net, freedom-4-life.net. You can get my book, Life Mastery, Living Life by Design, not by default there. It's an easy read. People tell me, I don't know because I wrote it. So other people have told me it's an easy read. So that's out there as well. My Life Mastery course that we've talked about, kind of those foundational things that we've kind of unpacked today, is out there as well. And for people who want to have just a free snapshot of where they're at in their life mastery journey, I have a discovery tool out there. 40 quick questions. You take your score at the end, and it'll tell you where you're at in your life mastery journey and what's the next step I can take in that journey. That is totally free. So whether you purchase anything or spend more than 5 minutes on the site, please take that discovery tool and just give yourself maybe a little bit of knowledge to say, hey, what's my next step in this journey? All of that's on my website as well.
Wonderful.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Great connecting with you. I'd love to have you back on. Please stay in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me on. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Journey to Your Best Self podcast. We appreciate you being part of this community. For more resources, insights, and ways to connect, head over to youroneself.com. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, including Apple, Spotify, and Overcast. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, keep aligning your mind, body, and spirit, and peace, love, and self-discovery.